Okay, welcome back. How was lunch? Did you get coffee? We need coffee. We got to finish out strong today. Our next session is called Retirement Rules Made Clear. Who's covered, who's not, and why it matters. In this session, we'll learn which employees must be enrolled in Louisiana retirement systems, who can opt out, and how to meet enrollment and reporting requirements. It's my pleasure to announce our instructor for this session, Mr. Kenneth Herbold. He's the Director of Actuarial Services for our office, the Louisiana Legislative Auditor, and is an associate of the Society of Actuaries, an enrolled actuary, and a CFA charter holder. He has been with the LLA since September 2021. Kenny has more than 25 years of experience providing actuarial and administrative consulting on a wide range of post-retirement benefits for governmental entities, private, not-for-profits, and for-profit employers, hospital organizations, church plans, and insurance companies. For the past 9 years, including his time at the LLA, he has worked for state governments in overseeing governmental defined benefit plans. Please welcome Mr. Kenneth Herbold.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Wonderful, wonderful. So good afternoon. I don't know why they put the actuary right after lunch when everybody's stomach is full. It doesn't seem like a good choice, but we are going to do what we can. Today, I'm not going to be doing a lot of, it's not going to be an actuarial discussion. This is primarily administrative for the retirement systems. Again, I'm not sure if that's more exciting or less exciting than an actuarial discussion, but we'll do what we can. So we're going to talk about basically the 4 retirement systems that most of you are going to touch. We're going to talk about firefighters' retirement system, municipal employees' retirement system, municipal police employees' retirement system, and we're going to talk about the parochial employees' retirement system. So why should we be talking about some of this stuff? Well, my next door neighbor is about to retire. He's kind of hitting that age where he's starting to talk to his retirement system, figuring out what his benefit's going to look like. Now that they got rid of the weapon GPO, the government pension offset for Social Security, you know, he's really looking forward to what he's going to be able to do and what he's going to be able to get, since he did work both in the private sector and in the public sector. But his first job was for the Legislative Council nearly 40 years ago. Legislative Council doesn't exist anymore. So he's having a conversation, most of his roles were with state government, so he's having a conversation with the Louisiana State Employees Retirement System about whether he gets credit for that period of time. Because he certainly didn't keep pay stubs. He doesn't know how long he worked, how much he made at that point in time. It turns out, neither does the retirement system. And the Legislative Council, again, they don't exist. No one has any idea where these records are. So what really matters is the data that you communicate to the retirement systems. Basically, the data that they have, the quality of that data is the backbone of everything that they do. And it matters most because it has an impact on what your employees get in retirement. It matters how we calculate their benefit, but then it also translates to whether the valuation is good or not. The valuation is what drives all of our policy decisions around retirement benefits. So if the valuation and that data isn't good, then maybe our decisions on whether we want to improve benefits, we need to cut back on benefits, we want to offer a cost of living adjustment to our retirees, we may not be making the right decision if our numbers are not correct. So it's extremely important that we are communicating the right information at the right time to make sure that the contributions are also appropriate for the employer and what they have to contribute. So what am I going to talk about? Let's figure out if I can make this work. All right. So today, we're going to talk about eligibility, who's covered basically, what are the enrollment and reporting requirements. We'll talk about contributions, touch a little bit on compensation, basically categories of what matters, what are you supposed to be contributing on, is that the same as what benefits are calculated on, and we're going to finish with why it matters. And I did throw in a few best practices, but honestly those kind of boil down to keep good records, make checklists, and be consistent. There we go. So before I actually get started, there are a few acronyms that I'm going to use. I might say them. They're sprinkled throughout the presentation. A lot of people like to use acronyms without actually telling you what they are, so I figured it would be good to have a slide. I'm not going to read them to you. You can see there. So we'll move on from that. All right, so who's covered? Basically, it should be every full-time employee that works for your agency is going to be covered. But full-time isn't the same for each retirement system. They have very different definitions. So you could be managing a city employee who's in municipal, and then maybe you're also responsible for your local firefighter's retirement or your local firefighter district or something like that. There's different definitions that matter, but generally speaking, the easiest way and your safest bet is going to be all full-time employees. Municipal police is a little bit different. It is basically all full-time individuals who work for a police department plus a couple of additional people. So the item that I like to point out on this one is that if you are a police chief and you work and you earn at least $1,000 in a given month, that you're considered full-time as far as the municipal police employees are concerned. For a municipal employees retirement system, I think the key here, the key word up here is participating. So municipal employees is one of the few retirement systems where participation is not necessarily mandatory. The employer must opt in to participate in the retirement system. So it is something that you can still choose to do if, for whatever reason, the city that you work for, municipality that you work for, or even some small agencies. So it's not just municipalities who participate in the municipal employees retirement system. There are the LMA also participates in municipal employees, and so it is still something that you can do, but it's not mandatory, whereas for municipal police employees, it's every single municipal police department in the state should be participating in the retirement system. Again, the rules, the definition of full-time versus not full-time is going to vary. Even for firefighters, right? It seems relatively like small amount of money, but so it's important to know though that you can earn more than $375 in a month and not be considered full-time. So it's not the only defining factor, right? So it is, if you are a temporary employee, if you're a part-time employee, even if you earn more, you may not be considered full-time. And I think we have firefighter retirement system people here, so if I'm misstating anything, please feel free to correct me. I will admit that this is not generally my area of expertise. I'm on the actuarial side. I don't do a lot of administrative work at this point, so I'm more than happy to be corrected. If someone knows something that that I'm making an incorrect statement, please raise your hand. Tell me that I'm doing something wrong. I'm happy to be corrected. That reminds me, though, I did mean to make sure that everybody has the handouts. So hopefully you have handouts. This is where most of the detail is going to be. I didn't include a lot of detail in my slides because I don't like a lot of words while I'm up here talking. But this is the important piece, right? You should have 2 to 3 pages per employer. So if you don't have it in there, and I will be referencing a lot of this information, so if you don't have a copy of this, please make sure we get that for you as well. I don't know the answer to that. It was in the original packet, yeah. Okay. So I apologize if y'all don't have them in front of you. But they're not, it's not important necessarily for the presentation. They're there as resources for you all, so you can go back and reference them. They're what I thought, and with the retirement system's help, was the most important information regarding these specific topics. And again, if you have questions, I'm happy to make this a conversation rather than just me standing up here and lecturing you, because that's not nearly as entertaining as if you have questions, please just jump in. Absolutely. Yes. So the municipality itself has to opt in to participate. So it's not legislation. So I think from what I've heard, there is very likely to be legislation this coming session because an employer, I don't think it's a municipality, I think it's a smaller agency is opting in to participate. So we'll put forth legislation to allow. If the municipality already has not already made that choice, then you're not required to do anything. But you certainly can. You can still do that, right? If you don't have a defined benefit plan, and that's something that your employers you have to. I don't know the. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's going to have to go through legislation to put you into statute. Yeah.
Is that for just employees, or is that separate for police and firefighters?
So for firefighters and police, it is mandatory participation. Yeah. So every police department in the municipal police department in the state should be participating.
There is an opt-out, but you have to join.
There is an opt-out, which I'm about to get to. That's on an employee level. Yeah. So let's go ahead and switch to that, right? So the very bottom line is talking about opt-out rules. This is really related to whether you are participating in Social Security or not. So Social Security participation will occur on an employer level, right? So anybody who works for a specific employer is going to be either participating in Social Security or not participating in Social Security. Louisiana is one of the few states where something like 95% of public employees don't participate in Social Security. So most likely, you're not participating in Social Security, so it's not something that you would consider. But for example, for municipal police employees retirement system, I think there's a list of 112 or something like that municipalities that participate in Social Security. So their employees, so the employer is required to provide the retirement benefit. The employee has the ability to opt out on an individual basis. And it must occur within the first 30 days of employment. So this is a detail that municipal employees, you may or may not know, are in the midst of a number of lawsuits trying to deal with this, particularly with small municipalities that their employees either opted out or were not aware that they could participate. I don't know the details. I'm not trying to opine on one way or the other in that general direction, but there were a number of municipalities that never really reported anything. They just said everybody's opted out. They didn't, as far as I'm aware, at that time have a process to report what you're trying to do. And that, so they have created a number of rules, which I'll talk about in a little bit when we get to the next slide, about what your reporting requirements are, whether you have participants, don't have participants, you have people who want to opt out or don't want to opt out. My understanding is that firefighters also has this ability, but 99% of their employers don't participate in Social Security, so it's not a similar consideration for them. MERS and PERS. PERS, you can see you do have a limited ability to opt out, but you have to start after you're 55. So the majority of MERS and PERS participants are going to be in the system. They're structured a little bit differently. They have a Plan A and a Plan B. So they have different benefits and different contribution levels depending on whether you are covered by Social Security or not. So Plan A, Plan A is generally higher contributions, higher benefits. That's for people who are not covered by Social Security. Plan B has lower employee contributions, lower benefits. I don't remember if the employer contributions are currently lower or not, but that's for individuals who are covered by Social Security. And this is not a choice. For all employers are either in, all employees of a given employer are either in Plan A or in Plan B. You don't get to choose Plan A or Plan B if you're in MERS or if you're in PERS. It's all or nothing, basically. Let me talk really quickly. We talked about who's in, right? So who's not included. I mentioned temporary workers, part-time employees. For MERS, there is one additional group of employees that is an exception. So basically, most elected officials are not permitted to participate in MERS, except if you were in an elected position, in an ineligible position, basically, on January 1, 1997, and you participated in MERS or another public retirement system. So it's a very unique exception. I doubt there's going to be a lot of people who are falling under this category at this point in time. I haven't spoken with them to know what level, but it is something that you need to be considerate of, right? Because they could have been in another retirement system, they could have been in an elected position somewhere else, and now you're the one who is having to deal with this, and so you have to be considerate. So you may be able to talk to the retirement system and ask them questions, and so that's going to be a running theme through most of my presentation. When in doubt, call the retirement system. You know, you're welcome to call me. My response is going to be call the retirement system because I'm not the one that deals with this all the time. They're the one that deals with this. They know the rules, and they're more than willing to help you because they want to make sure that everything is being done correctly and being done appropriately. Okay, enrollment and reporting. So just so you were aware, if you weren't already, membership in these retirement systems is effective as of your date of hire, right? So it doesn't matter when you complete the paperwork, when you provide information to the retirement system, everybody on your date of hire, that's when you start in participating in the retirement system. You need to submit enrollments, and to the extent you have the ability to opt out, basically as soon as you possibly can. With the municipal employees retirement system, so if you look at the handout, they are the most paperwork heavy. They've got a 7-page enrollment form. You have to submit birth certificate, medical records. There's a whole host of things that all have to occur, and it all must be done within the first 30. It all has to be done basically within the first 30 days. And if you have an individual that wants to opt out, they consider any opt-out affidavit that they receive outside of the 30-day window null and void. It doesn't count. So in that particular case, you are, for IMPERS, you are required to enroll someone, submit the initial contributions for that individual, and then they can opt out, and they get those contributions back. So the employee is not going to lose money even if they want to opt out. But I think this is kind of in my opinion, I've worked with defined benefit plans a lot, right? And I'm a fan of defined benefit plans in general. It's a permanent choice. It's an irrevocable choice. You cannot go back. You can't come back in 2 years and say, I changed my mind. I really know I'm going to stick around. I want this benefit, and get back in. So if you choose to opt out, you're putting yourself in a difficult situation because you no longer have those benefits. And hazardous duty plans in particular are one of those where you have a lot more coverage in a defined benefit plan than you are going to have in even Social Security or a defined contribution plan.
Online question, can you please re-say why elected officials are not eligible for MERS, or what was the exception? Their boss was an elected official and they pay into MERS for him.
I missed the last part.
Their boss is an elected official and they pay into MERS for him.
Right, okay, so I don't know when this was put into statute, but in statute, basically, that's where the exception comes from. It's not a plan rule or anything like that. The majority of these rules are written into state statute, so we can go look them up. For these 4 plans in particular, there are very few administrative rules that are going to define something as substantial as that. So the exception is you were in an ineligible position, so you're in an elected position basically on January 1, 1997, and you are participating in a public retirement system in Louisiana. So it doesn't have to be MERS, it could be another retirement system. And and then you are eligible to continue. And you are eligible, I believe, if you leave and come back to an ineligible position, you can continue to participate as well. So feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail because talking about details is boring, but I have an hour to fill. So I'm going to try and make sure that we have enough time to get through stuff. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I apologize. You want me to repeat that question? Okay. So enrollment, again, MPERS is going to be your most paperwork heavy as far as enrollment is concerned. 3 of the 4 retirement systems, FRS, MERS, and MPERS, all have an online portal, though, that allow you to do everything. You can upload information and submit information there. Parochial retirement system does not have an online portal, but they do have forms for you to fill out and submit to them. So it's, generally speaking, I've looked at it. I haven't done it myself, obviously, but it doesn't seem overly cumbersome for the most part. There's a lot, there's stuff that goes into it. Obviously, collecting your own records is going to have an impact, but generally speaking, it's a lot easier now than it may have been in the past. Reporting, though, again, you use the portals, needs to be done on a monthly basis, right? So you need to report compensation. You want to make sure you are reporting changes in status. So, as I talked about my neighbor who, is getting ready to retire, I said he's worked in public service and he's worked in private. I'll pause real quickly for a question.
Online question. So any new employee is required to opt out of MERS if they don't want it?
So the question was, any employee is required to opt out of MERS. So we're talking about municipal employees retirement system. You do not have a choice. If your employer participates in municipal employees retirement system, you are required to participate in municipal retirement system. You do not get to opt out. All right, so monthly reporting, that's where we were, right? Talking about my neighbor again. He's worked for the Legislative Council in his 20s. Now I am forgetting, but he has worked for like 3 or 4 different state agencies, right? So technically, these are all considered different employers. They all have different payroll practices. They're all doing things differently. He also worked in the private practice. So he is now back at district attorney's office and looking at retirement, getting ready to retire. So clearly his current employer doesn't have all of his information. Maybe, since it's only your highest several years of pay, so maybe only that matters, right? But his dates of hire and his dates of termination matter. That's how we calculate whether or not you have, how much service you have, right? So if you are not communicating this information on a regular basis to retirement systems, they don't know. I've looked at some of the data that we work with for the valuations, and we don't know, because sometimes terminations aren't reported. So we're valuing someone, we're assuming someone is still working. Their pay is, a little bit questionable for the last year because they've only worked for 8 months. They only worked for 8 months out of the year, so it's a little lower. But we get a lot of questionable data that we have to deal with. And so now, how we are dealing with that one individual, how we are valuing that one individual for reporting purposes, for calculating your contributions, it kind of calls into question how good that particular calculation is. Now, you magnify that, and you have 200 plus employers, and they forget to tell us that, 25 of their individuals, or 2 or 3 here, 2 or 3 there. It starts to get into a little bit more of a difficult situation. And then maybe they're gone. We don't have that information. And then 20 years down the road, they're looking to come get their retirement benefit because they retired from a different employer, and we have to go back and dig through records, or I say we, but the retirement systems have to go back and dig through records. They have to go figure out what this person's service actually is. And so it becomes a bit more time consuming. It's a huge administrative headache for the retirement systems, and maybe those records no longer exist. So that's why I am trying to emphasize that this type of reporting, this type of record keeping for the retirement systems is extremely important, because it allows them to have clean processes and allows them to provide the benefits that your employees deserve because they worked for it, right? So it's extremely important in my opinion. And of course, if you don't do it, if you forget to tell them about somebody, you don't submit your contributions on time, you might be subject to penalties and interest as well. And what that looks like, it depends on how long you wait, how long it takes. For municipal employees, municipal police, let's talk a little bit more about them because they have more going on and require a little bit more. There are situations where small municipal departments may not have any active or full-time police officers. Okay, then you obviously wouldn't be submitting anything, or you have a couple of full-time police officers that have chosen to opt out. So basically, you are a small municipality, you have no participants of municipal employees. They have an annual reporting requirement to tell them that. So they have a form on their online portal called the Zero Participant Certification. So you have to go do that annually. I would suggest you do it monthly. They would prefer you do it monthly. You make it part of your process with all of your monthly reporting anyway, right? It's just a checkbox. You say, I'm certifying that we don't have any people who are supposed to be participating in your retirement system, and that helps them maintain their records. I'm actually about to try and dig back through probably 10 or 15 years worth of data as part of the disagreements they are having with some of the municipalities about participation. So I am now having to dig through this stuff as well, trying to help verify the employees, because some of these municipalities that they have disagreements with don't have the records from 15 years ago to say, well, here's the compensation for this particular employee, or here's all of the employees that we had. You can see that these people, we paid for everybody. We didn't, so the people you're claiming weren't here, or they weren't working, or, so we're having to go through and look at other potential sources of information. It's just one of those things that if from the get-go, right, they had the information that they needed, these lawsuits, these disagreements, we wouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars trying to figure out how, what should be happening. Okay, contributions. This is the one that a lot of people like to hear about, because this is the money, right? So there's 3 different types of contributions that each of the retirement systems may get. We have employee contributions, we have employer contributions, and we have some plans get dedicated revenue, so ad valorem tax, insurance premium taxes, some of those go in to offset. And basically, the employee contributions are generally fixed. It's not exactly true, but year to year, they're basically the same. And absent the dedicated revenues, basically the employers are going to pick up whatever's left over. So just in this graph, what we're looking at, basically, firefighters' retirement system essentially has one class of employee. Everybody pays 10% at the moment. It is set by statute. And as I said, though, it's not entirely true that it is 10%. They have a sliding scale. It's between 8 to 10%, basically, and it will come down as the employer contribution comes down. So when the contributions start coming down for the employer, the participants also get a little bit of relief from that perspective as well. But Right now, they're at the cap, they're paying 10%. Municipal employees, I mentioned they have Plan A and they have Plan B. The top bar is Plan B. It's lower because those individuals are participating in Social Security. They're paying Social Security taxes themselves. The employer is paying Social Security taxes, so they have a lower contribution. Those are somewhere, for Plan A, somewhere between 4 and 6%, according to statute, but the board gets to set the exact number, anywhere between 4 and 6%. Right now, I believe that's at 5%. And then Plan A, again, is higher. They're at 10%. And their range is 9.25 to 10. Again, that's set in statute, and the board gets to decide where it falls within that statute. And so right now, it's 10% for them. I'll skip to PERS because it's relatively similar. Slightly different ranges than it is for MERS. But again, there's a range that's set in statute. The board gets to decide how much or where it falls within that range. Those numbers are 9.5 for Plan A on the bottom, and I believe 3% for Plan B. Municipal police. You can see there's two bars for them. So they don't have Plan A and Plan B, but they do have different subgroups within their plan. They have hazardous duty and non-hazardous duty. There's a few other details that kind of distinguish what the contributions are. But those also 10% and 8%, and it just depends. Municipal employees also has a sliding scale for those who are currently at 10%. It's not the same as firefighters' retirement system, but it's similar. So theirs can go down to, I didn't write it down. So theirs can go down to, I think 7.5 or 7.25. So it's up to 10%. And as their contribution comes down, that'll change. So how do we get from there to the employer contribution, right? So we as actuaries calculate, okay, what do we think the total contribution is going to be or needs to be? And I like to describe this as what we're trying to decide between is we know what the benefits are, or we think we know what the benefits are. Obviously, we're guessing at that as well because we don't know the future. But we are trying to determine how much of those benefits can we pay from the investments. And whatever's left over is going to come from contributions. So that's what the valuation really boils down to. That's the only thing we're doing is we're figuring out how much we're going to pay people, how much of that can we use our current assets for, or how much can we pay with our current assets, and everything else has got to come in contribution form. So we know approximately how much we're going to get from the employees because we can estimate their pay. We have a fixed contribution rate that we're going to get. We estimate how much in taxes the retirement system is going to get. And again, whatever's left over falls on the employer. This changes annually and is not calculated, but is approved by the Public Retirement. I get this, sorry, I get this wrong every time. It's PRSAC, P-R-S-A-C, Public Retirement Systems Actuarial Committee. No idea why I can't keep that in my brain, because we have meetings multiple times a year. So they're the group that basically it's an oversight body, has some legislators on it, various agency people like the Department of Administration, Treasury. My boss, Mike Wagaspak, is on there. They are approving whatever valuation, they are approving the contribution rates that the retirement system is bringing forward, or if we have an opposing opinion, we might bring our own valuation and our own contribution recommendation. So the PRSAC is the one that approves the minimum required contribution. And that's an important distinction because this is the minimum that is required to be contributed on an actuarial basis, but all 4 retirement systems have the ability to hold the employer rate higher than the minimum that's required. So the purpose of that is because they have a side fund. So they have the side fund that they use to either maintain stability in the employer contribution rates, right? So if employer contribution rates are going up, they could pull some money out of this side fund and use that to not require the employers to increase their contribution. They also can use that to pay cost of living adjustments for the retirees, that kind of thing. There are rules they can't just say, oh, minimum says it's going to be 10%, we really want you to contribute 30. They can't just make up whatever they want. There are rules that define how much above the minimum they can set, but that's going to be in there as well. So I think generally speaking, the retirement systems simply communicate contribute X. They don't say the minimum is X, and we're holding it Y % above X, and so now contribute some other number. They're just going to give you the total, but I think it's a useful piece of information to have and to know that that's how things are going to, that's how they're being calculated. All the contributions are based on earnable compensation, right? So they are communicated as a % of pay. And so so we'll talk about what compensation means, because that's different for everybody as well. But that's how you're determining the dollar amounts that need to be transmitted to the retirement systems. There are some additional rules for rehired retirees and for drop participants, and I apologize. That's an acronym that managed to slip through, didn't make it on my acronym slide. For those who are not familiar, it's Deferred Retirement Option Plan. And basically that means you retire on paper, but you continue to work. So as far as the retirement system is concerned, as far as your benefit is concerned, everything stops. There are provisions for you to come back to work and not necessarily retire at the end of the drop, at the end of your term within drop, but that's basically the idea that's going on there, is that you're no longer accruing a benefit. Your payment is going into this your own individual side account that will be paid out to you in a lump sum later on. So contributions for rehired retirees. Generally speaking, and again, everything that I talk about is generally because there are different rules for every single retirement system, but I'm trying to generalize to give us a rule of thumb. So generally speaking, right, both employer and for rehired retirees, both employee and employer contributions are going to be required. Sometimes, so if you come back full time, you retire and then you come back to work full time, your benefit is likely to be suspended. You're not going to be able to get both your benefit and your pay, and you're going to accrue an additional benefit, but that's not always the case. You come back part time. If you're participating in parochial employees retirement system, there are some special rules. So as an employee, and so this is one of the reasons why I think it's useful information and good to know, is that as an employee, you might be like, well, I'm not getting an additional benefit. Why do I have to make a contribution? You'll get those contributions back. But this is also designed to prevent a financial incentive for certain employers to give preferential hiring to retirees instead of a new hire. So there are policy reasons associated with why we want employee and employer contributions on every employee that's working, and even if they are retired or and coming back. So there's some policy reasons behind it that I'm happy to go into if people have questions, but that's not what this is about necessarily. So there are a couple of, if you look at your handouts, we kind of detailed the actual exceptions to that rule. There's more for, there's more for parochial retirement system than there is for everybody else. I don't think I listed them for municipal police, but there are some minor exceptions for a small group of people that you may be able to return to municipal police and not have your benefits suspended and not make contributions, but it's a relatively small group. All right, I think that's everything that we wanted to talk about there. There we go. Compensation. So this is, people find a lot more interest in the contribution side of things because that's the money, right? And I'll probably say less about compensation than I will about a lot of other things, but I think it's probably the most important. Because this is the most important thing where record keeping really, really matters. So dates of employment, termination, hire, those are all important, but the compensation that you communicate is equally, if not more important. So I'll go back to my neighbor. Maybe his compensation 40 years ago doesn't matter, right? Because you're only using the highest 3 or the highest 5 years of compensation for any given individual. But it's not always the tail end of your career where you have your highest compensation, particularly if you're working for multiple employers, right? So you could be working for somebody, you're working for a municipality, and you're working, you're in a director role, or you're working in an executive role, basically, and you're making a lot of money, and you decide, I'm done here, I'm gonna move closer to my kids, I'm gonna, move out to my camp or something like that, but I'm not ready to retire, so I'm gonna cut back and I'm gonna go work for a small municipality. They don't pay as much, and your pay goes down, but you're still working in we'll use municipal employees retirement system as an example. You're still working in a MERS covered role. May not be for the same employer, but your pay from 10 years ago might be your highest pay because you've cut back or you've gone to another role that's lower. So that's why it's extremely important that we get all of that correct. That's one reason. The other reason is because it's kind of, it's how contributions are going to be made, right? You're making sure that the employee and the employer are paying for their benefit that they are going to earn. So if you overpay, right, you report compensation that is not included. So the simplest compensation definition is going to be municipal police. Theirs is basically everything except for overtime. Nice and simple. Any pay you receive, but we're not going to count overtime. That's a little easier to do, but then you look at some others. I've got firefighters right here. They've got base pay, state supplemental pay, education pay, holiday pay, seniority incentive pay, but they do include overtime, but only scheduled overtime. They don't include unscheduled overtime, and then certain unusual payments, right? So if you code something wrong, and then you communicate it to the retirement system, one, the pay is wrong, and the contributions that you submitted are wrong. And so you're either making the employee overpay because you're taking out the employee contributions as well, or the employee is underpaying and you're pushing the burden onto another employer as well if you as the employer are underpaying in some way. And so this is really where record keeping is super important, where making sure that you've coded everything correctly. Now, if you've been in the system for a long time, generally I would assume this isn't going to be an issue because you've set up your payroll system. But I've seen plans or municipalities that go through a payroll system change, and then they struggle with making sure that they've got a new system and things are spitting out differently. I haven't seen it here in Louisiana, but I was in Texas for a number of years, and we had a city that that particular retirement system paid on overtime, and they were extremely underfunded. And that was one of the reasons. It was a firefighter retirement system, and they were significantly understaffed, so they were paying a ton of overtime to their firefighters, but they didn't break out pay in a way where they could communicate what's overtime and what's not overtime to their actuary. So their actuary couldn't actually value this in an appropriate manner, and then when they were trying to make benefit changes to address the excessive benefits that people were receiving and the level of benefits that people were receiving, they said that we can't do it. Our payroll system just isn't sufficient. And so they've now had to go through a number of iterations of trying to fix things, a new payroll system. The point being is that if you want to make sure you get it right up front, because it helps everybody, and I'm just going to harp again on the need for quality, clean data has a huge impact, has a variety of impacts on the plan staff, the benefit calculations, the actuaries doing the valuation, and how much everything is being contributed, and how the contributions are being calculated, and whether those are accurate or not. So I think that's my takeaway from today, is that clean, quality data matters. What time is it? We are going to 2:20, right? All right, so we got about 15 minutes. So I kind of jumped ahead.
Kenny.
Why it matters, right? Yes, I'm sorry.
Hey, we have an online question. Can you take it?
Absolutely.
What happens to the contributions if somebody has been contributing both the government and the employee, but they don't make the employment through the vestment period?
So anybody who does not vest in a benefit, who does not get a benefit, your employee contributions will be returned to you, right? So if you terminate, if it's 5 years in order to vest in the retirement system, which means you are eligible to get a benefit at some point in the future, even if you terminate, you get your money back because you are not, the retirement system is not at this moment allowed to keep your benefits. I've learned, so I was in private practice as a consultant, worked a lot with single employer plans, which don't have employee contributions. Came to Louisiana, said, I think I know a lot about retirement law, and I learned that why lawyers say stay in your lane, actuaries say, even though as actuaries we tend to try and stretch and provide interpretations and that kind of thing, I learned that in public law, virtually anything goes. So there is a possibility that statute could change and provisions could be set up where employee contributions would not be returned to the employee in certain situations, even if they don't get a benefit. But right now, if you don't earn a benefit for the service that you provide, your employee contributions are going to come back to you. So, again, why am I talking about this today? Accurate, quality data is important, right? The benefits that we're calculating for your employees when they retire, it could come from any number of employers over their career. So you may only be providing a piece. So even if you have the best data, some of these other employers don't. And so we're trying, we want to make sure that everybody is working towards improving what they can. It's going to improve our annual valuations, which mean, again, that leads to policy decisions. It's the contributions that we are calculating for you as employers, for you as employees. It helps make sure that everything that we are doing is as accurate as it possibly can be. Again, it ensures compliance with state law. I mean, that's important. Obviously, you don't want to find out a year or two down the road that you coded your payroll incorrectly. You've underpaid your contributions on the compensation for these employees, and now you owe penalties and fines, and you're coming back, and they have to come back and get money from you, basically. Or your employee undercontributed, and now they have to pay as well in order to get their benefit. That's something that has certainly happened, is that the employee is going to have to pay their back contributions and interest. And so we're looking at interest in the 7 to 8% range, which is, you're not getting that on any money market fund. You're not getting that on, you may have been able to get that on 10-year bonds for a brief period recently, but it has an impact, basically, and so it's worth keeping in mind. Before I move, one more question, yes?
I'm not sure if you answered this. Does the employer contribution stay in the system if the employee leaves before vested?
Yes, the answer is yes. So the employer contribution stays with the retirement system. Now, the reason for that is we are taking that into account. So I say we. The system actuaries, when they are calculating how much an employer needs to pay, we are taking into account the fact that a number of current participants are going to leave, and they are going to take their contributions out, and they're not going to get a benefit. If we didn't do that, the contribution would actually be different, right? So we are taking all of that into account in order to, when we are making the determination of how much the employer should be paying. And so I can see why, someone might ask that question, because it seems like, well, we paid for that benefit, but that benefit's not going to be paid. Technically, you weren't paying for that benefit. You were paying for your other employees. It's just I think they threatened to put a whiteboard up here with me so I could fill up time and do some actuarial calculations for you. But that's basically, it boils down to, we are already taking that into account. So we are expecting a certain number of employees to terminate before they get vested, or to choose not to get a deferred retirement benefit and take their contributions out regardless. So all that goes into the calculation. So it's a very long answer for yes. You don't get them back. Any other questions before I go to my second to last slide? So I said this all boils down to checklists, good record keeping, that kind of thing. My first governmental role was in Texas. Very small agency. I think we had 6 or 7 employees. Literally no one did my job before I got there. They did about a year and a half prior to my arrival. But when I walked in, some of the duties were split among 4 different people, but no one knew exactly what it was that their prior actuary did. So I had no checklists, I had no procedures, I had nothing to tell me this is what I'm supposed to do. Even my bosses were like, we're not 100% sure. We know that we do these reports and we do some of these other things, and this is what statute says, but we're not 100% sure what the previous actuary did. So it's a little morbid, but I'm an actuary. My general perspective when I step into a role is, what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? Can the person who steps in after me actually do my job with a limited amount of getting up to speed? So I know a lot of you are probably in human resources and that kind of thing. And from my experience working with human resource managers and doing administrative consulting, plan benefit administrative consulting and that kind of thing, having quality procedures makes everything go much smoother. And so that's really all this is, right? It's basically make a checklist of all the things you need to do, make a habit. That's why I say for municipal police, even though you don't need to do it except once a year, go in and check that box every month, because it's a habit. It's on your monthly checklist, and so okay, I need to go do that. I'm going to go do that the second of every month, or the first Monday of every month, or whatever it is. It's about making those habits, making those checklists. And it just comes back to, if you are providing clean information, clean quality data to the retirement systems, it makes everybody's life down the road a lot easier. It means, okay, one second. It means I don't have to dig through Louisiana Workforce Commission data to figure out who worked for Vernon Parish Police Department 20 years ago, and if the information I'm receiving from somebody is correct or not, right? It means the retirement systems, when those participants come to ask for their benefit, they don't have to dig through paper records from 20 or 30 years ago and ask a municipality or whoever what actually happened, because you give it now, it's clean, and it allows them to do their work a lot easier. So there was a question, an online question, I think?
Yes. What if the fire department doesn't track unscheduled and scheduled overtime? Is it all subject to retirement?
I'm gonna, like I said earlier, I don't mind being corrected. One of my first jobs was as a telemarketer, which is an absolutely horrible job to ever have. And, we were taught to say, that's a great question, I'm going to have to get back to you. But it did translate very well to consulting as well, because you get a lot of questions that you don't know the answer to. That's one of those questions that I don't know the answer to, other than to say that my expectation is no. The definition of compensation is laid out. And it would be inappropriate for one person's compensation definition to be different than someone else simply because one department tracks it and one department does not. So I defer to the firefighter's retirement system. I'm getting nods, so hopefully that means I got it right. Now, how you deal with that, I don't know. That's what the firefighter's department, the fire department I was talking about in Texas, they had to figure that out and start tracking things properly. So it's one of the things that, I get for small agencies, for small municipalities, a lot of this stuff falls on one individual or one or two individuals, and it becomes difficult. But the longer you leave it, the more it compounds and the more difficult it becomes down the road. So if you know of an issue, I would suggest doing your best to bump it up your priority list if you can. We're relatively close. I don't know if I need to stretch it out 4 minutes or not, but okay. And I won't do that, and I won't attempt. I was at a conference last week, and one individual stretched it out by singing Sinatra. We were in Vegas, which was, so it was appropriate. He also could sing. I cannot, so I won't do that to you. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you.